I can't think of a presidential debate that hasn't been described as the most important moment of the presidential campaign. This season is being called the inflection point, I think, is the current phrase. It may be, but usually presidential debaters are so carefully prepped that they are defensive, trying to avoid big mistakes. And unless the election is completely out of reach of one of the candidates, and I don't think this one is yet, there probably wouldn't be much of a calculation in going for everything, going extremely aggressively. So my hunch is that both candidates will perform adequately, and it will not be the decisive moment of the election.
Yeah, I could see it being a draw. And I think the one thing that's characterized Obama throughout this whole thing, throughout the primaries and the Sarah Palin blip and all that, is he's very cool. I mean, he doesn't want to be cold, but he's very cool. And I think, I'm not worried about him getting through this debate. I think we have to look at the backdrop. What is it? It's this financial catastrophe. And that could change his change message. Maybe it's not so much change, and maybe it's more, I can provide stability. But I think he's going to do fine. McCain, the second part of it, Tony, as you know, we're old enough to remember Nixon Kennedy, is appearance. I think there may be a great contrast in appearance here that may not favor McCain. Bob?
A draw is a victory for Obama, because this debate is about national security, although I think he'll bring the economy in the way Kennedy, who was supposed to be debating Nixon on domestic policy, wanted to bring in foreign policy, so he said we can't be strong abroad if we're weak at home. But people don't understand this experienced commander-in-chief question. It's not a binary question. The pollsters go out and say who has more experience, who would be better at commander-in-chief. McCain's going to win that. I mean, he's going to, 70%, 65% are going to say yes. But in 1960, what we learned when Nixon ran on experience counts was that people could decide, yeah, Nixon had more experience, but Kennedy had enough. So a draw in this debate on the national security part of it is actually going to benefit Obama a lot.
Well, it's sort of curious, because this is an election which I think at this point most of us think is at least slightly leaning to Obama, if not more so. And yet, the question traditionally is the less experienced candidate, if he can stay on the same platform with the more experienced man, the incumbent, or in this case the almost incumbent, McCain, he's accomplished something. Do you think that Obama merely has to stay on the same platform with him, or do you think he needs to make some...
I don't think that's what he's aiming for.
I don't think so either.
I think he's aiming for much more than that.
Knockout punch?
Knockout punches... Look,
the
first debate...
The only knockout punch is if McCain blows his top, which
well,
he's capable of doing.
But that would be the tactic, right? To try to goad him. I mean, we've all been in debate prep. You try to figure out what's the psychological vulnerability of the guy or woman, and how do you goad him into making a mistake. So that would be, I assume,
the other
Obama's...
thing is, what about McCain? We've seen him in recent weeks. He doesn't just go speak extemporaneously. He reads everything. I mean, he reads everything.
So does Obama. Obama walks around with his own teleprompter.
No, but you can't sell that. I mean, Obama can walk in here right now and wow, he could wow even you.
You don't seriously believe that Obama needs cue cards of some kind to get through this debate.
I know.
I think McCain on the economy does. I mean, look, he had last week the worst week, or one of the worst weeks, in modern presidential politics, beginning with the fundamentals of the economy are sound, and then lurching from one position to another. And he convinced the country he doesn't know what he's talking about on the economy. But I do agree with you on one thing. In the end, the outcome of the debates is not necessarily decisive. The first Kerry-Bush debate was as close to a rout as we've seen in modern presidential debates. Kerry won the next two debates as well, lost the election. But this is a different year. Well, you don't have a president with 50% approval. You don't have an Iraq war that's over 50%. You have a whole different situation.
You make an important point. The debates are not about who wins debating points. The debates are about who persuades the voters to be more likely to want to vote for him for president, even if George Bush was a stumblebum verbally, but he convinced people they'd rather have him than Al Gore in 2000, maybe even him than Kerry in 2004.
Some of it I think happened, but
how many people are going to watch this thing? Do we have an idea?
Well, we know somewhere between 50 and 80 million people. You had 80 million for, I think, Reagan Carter. You had 60 million for Kerry Bush.
I'm betting on north of 100 million.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a number.